All right, good morning, y'all. I want to talk about opportunity costs, which immediately everybody's like, all right, unsubscribe, I don't want to talk about that. Sounds like accounting, sounds boring, sounds like it's not a real concept, but I promise you when I teach econ, this is one of the core subjects that I tell students. I'm like, look, if you skip the rest of class, I don't care. Just know opportunity costs. So opportunity costs are whatever you have to give up to get something else. So if you are going to fill up your tank with gas, all of y'all will tell me, well, I know the opportunity cost for that, Ben. I've got to give up dollars. I've got to pay money to get gas in my tank. And you're absolutely right. That's your opportunity cost. But this is where we start to miss the boat, because when we start thinking about everything in dollars, we don't think about the real opportunity cost. So here's a silly example, all right? Imagine a buffet near where you live, about 30 minutes away, is running a free buffet Friday. So you just got to show up and you get to eat all you want for free. And you go, this is awesome. So you show up, you drive 30 minutes there, and there's a line outside the door, right? Everybody wants that free lunch. And again, I am making a pun here about free lunches, I'm sorry. But you show up and there's a line out the door of 50 people wanting that free lunch. And you go, well, the lunch is free, so I'm staying, right? So you stand in line for 2 hours, you get your free lunch. It's terrible because it's a free buffet. And then you go home, another 30-minute drive. So all in all, you've spent almost half of your day, hours and hours and hours of your day trying to get that free lunch. So you would look at me and say, Ben, I spent $0 on this lunch. And I'd be like, congrats, man. You also wasted almost half of your day, right? Hours and hours and hours, right? You can literally think about your hourly wage you make at work, or if you're on salary, divide it out, what your hourly wage should be. And that's how much money you just gave up. That's the opportunity cost, right? That is how much you gave up for that, quote, free buffet lunch. And it was probably terrible and you got food poisoning from it. So how does that factor into the outdoors? Well, I think there's a great story that we actually have here on our channel. So if you haven't watched The Final Send, check it out. I'll put a little show note right here. But The Final Send follows Dan, George, and myself through the bayous of Louisiana, where we had 3 days to try to catch a couple redfish. And we had decent weather, good sunlight, all these things that you need to make sight fishing work. And the first 2 days just don't go our way. I mean, George runs the motor, I think, over 150 miles combined. Like we cover a lot of ground trying to get a redfish, and it's just not panning out. And so that night we go back to where the Airbnb we're staying, and we go, okay, what are we doing wrong? And we had a lot of ideas, and I think it was Dan who's like, what if we pulled the boat out of the water and went to a completely different part of Louisiana? And both George and I were like, ah, man, that's a lot. You're asking a lot to like leave this great spot we're in. And he's like, hear me out. Look, we haven't caught anything and where we've been. And we think we should be doing a lot better. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, so either we can use our next day, our last day, to have more of the same, or we can risk it and go somewhere else. And actually what Dan was kind of unpacking in that moment was opportunity costs, right? So the next day, what was our cost? Well, we had 12 hours of fishing that we could use. And we could use it in the area that we had been fishing and not catching anything. Or we could use it to another area where there'll be some risk on whether we're gonna catch anything at all, but it would give us a new area to fish. And that was the core question we were asking, okay? What do we have to give up to try this new place? Well, obviously we're gonna give up the old place we've been fishing. Now we had some comfort there, right? We felt like it was worth giving up. But in that moment we were like, oh man, like how do we make this decision? And that is opportunity cost, right? Of you are having to give up something to get something else. Another context, so if we're thinking about, again, the outdoors, you could imagine like, hey, I wanna get a new deer rifle for the next season. Right? And you're like, I have used my deer rifle. I know my deer rifle, but I want the new shiniest deer rifle I can find. Well, one of the things that you are not going to take into account, right? What are you giving up by switching to that new deer rifle? Well, of course, the money to buy it, right? That's an easy opportunity cost. But what about getting everything dialed in? What about learning the new gun? What about, again, going and practicing instead of, having a broken-in gun that you know really well, right? Now you're going to have to go and train yourself, right? So you're going to give up time. So the opportunity cost is not the couple $100s you're going to spend on that new gun. It's all these things that you've also got to give up to get you back to where you were last deer season, right? That's the opportunity cost. So if you go out in the world, you'll learn really, really quickly, right? There's opportunity costs everywhere, right? You could think about it in another context. Maybe you're going fishing with your buds and you have someone, like we have someone in our group who loves to stay up late, and you're like, man, I want to catch up and talk and all those kind of things, and you're looking at it's 2 a.m. and you're like, man, I've got to go to bed because we're going to wake up, at 5 a.m., right? Well, you're going to think in your head again, it's like, okay, if I stay up another hour and hang out with my buddies, right, what am I giving up? Well, I'm giving up sleep and not feeling like trash the next morning, right? Like that's what I'm gonna be giving up. So I have to think about, the opportunity costs of that decision. So the more you go through life, again, the more it kind of ruins your perspective, because you start to see everything as an opportunity cost, right? I'm not just, doing this or doing that. I'm actually giving up this thing to get something else. And so that brings me back to the final point I want to tell about that Louisiana story. And it's actually a riff on opportunity costs, and it's called the sunk cost fallacy. Again, sorry to use nerdy terms, but the sunk cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy is saying that whenever you start to acknowledge your sunk cost to try to make a good decision, you've already missed it. You're making a bad decision. So sunk cost, what's a sunk cost? Well, it's something you've already put in that you cannot recover. And so in our context of Louisiana, right, we had already put in 2 days of fishing in that area where we weren't seeing a lot of productivity. Those were sunk costs. We could never get those back. We can't get that time back. I can't get the gas back into the motor. Like, that's all burned, it's gone. But there's something tempting as a human, right? You want to say, well, we've invested so much in this spot, we might as well stay another day to see if we can turn it all around. And actually what I said in that sentence is a great tip-off if you're ever stumbling upon the sunk cost fallacy. If you ever say, I might as well as, you're probably about to make a really bad decision, right? So again, rewinding it all the way back to Louisiana, there is a temptation for us to acknowledge our sunk costs, to stay in that area another day because we had already been there for 2 days. But that misses the whole point. It doesn't matter how much time we spent there. What matters is that we have 1 day left, and how do we use that to the highest potential? And this actually kind of stumbles upon the whole thing that economics is, right? So I sometimes joke that my redneck definition of well, Ben, what is econ? Y'all study stock market, you study money? I don't study any of that. No. So economics is trying to figure out how we can do the best we can with what we got, right? That's kind of my redneck definition, doing the best you can with what you got. And what that means is that when I say best we can, right, we want to get the most productivity, the most fishing time, the most fish, the most fun, whatever it is. You want to get the most out of the limited amount of stuff you have. And that is true no matter where you look, whether you look in the stock market, whether you look at the government, whether you look at your own pocket, right? You have a limited amount of stuff, and you have to make decisions based on the stuff you have. Well, when you're thinking about, again, trading in your money or trading in your time, you need to think about, well, what will that give me? Which is an opportunity cost. And so if this feels all circular, it kind of is, right? Economics is the study about how we all deal with opportunity costs. And when we're in the outdoors, we're not immune to that, right? We have to acknowledge that we're gonna give up time, we're gonna give up resources, we're gonna give up opportunities elsewhere, and we've gotta use that to the best of our abilities if we wanna kind of get the highest fun out of our time there. And so for me, as an economist who goes and experiences the outdoors, this is something I'm thinking about all the time, right? Is that if we have 2 more hours left in the day, do we stay where we are, or do we maximize the time we have left based on the conditions, the weather, the tides, or whatever, right? It doesn't matter what's happened. All that matters is what we can do next. And I think that's a core kind of metaphor you can use, again, at work, at home. Again, economics is this really powerful toolkit that if we apply it well can really unlock a lot of really cool possibilities. So anyways, hope this isn't too nerdy for the outdoor space. Hope this is actually kind of interesting, helpful. I'm gonna try to couch everything I'm talking about into some of the stories we've done so we can use some of our fishing films to kind of back up these ideas. But yeah, if there are economic concepts I need to cover, if there's things that we think might be interesting, please let us know. We'd love to cover it here. All right, guys, have a great day.